Good morning, everybody, and welcome once again to Arnie's Fantasy World of Sports. It's Monday, July 13, 2020. 10 days, that's right. We're almost in single digits. 10 days before the start of our Major League season. And I am more than just excited. I cannot hardly wait. I spent yesterday watching some scrimmage games. Yeah, and I'm thinking, this is better than spring training. You get to watch them by the whole team. Anyway, let's talk about some news that I read over the weekend. And I guess by now you've all heard Yasiel Puig is a player of interest to the Baltimore Orioles. That's right, the lowly Orioles, thinking about signing Yasiel Puig to a one-year contract. And when I first heard that, read it, I'm thinking, no way. I mean, the Orioles can't contend this year. There's not a lot of money flowing. Owners are complaining about revenue. Why would the Oriole brass go out and sign a player like Puig, who is not going to bring you a pennant or a championship in 2020? And he's a one-year rental. Until you dig a little deeper, which is what we do here on Lenny Melnick, FantasySports.com, right? When you dig a little deeper, here's what could happen. Well, let's say the Orioles, who desperately need a bat, Mancini's out for the year. So you go out and you get Puig. And we know Puig historically has been quite the streaky player. So let's say he gets in one of his hot streaks. And in one of his hot streaks, the Orioles trade him. Because they're not going to contend. They trade him, they pick up some prospects, they improve long term. So it makes all the sense in the world. Because remember, every game counts this year. We are in a 60-game schedule, dogfight, with 30 teams. So that ballpark, we know it's a hitter's park, Camden Yards. We know Puig can be a streaky hitter. We know he can hit for power. We know he can steal bases. He's a fantasy nightmare and dream all at the same time. Yet I could see someone like Puig taking off, playing well, getting traded, and the Orioles cashing in. So I say go for it, Baltimore. Let's see what you got. Let's do it. And let's get better long term. Detroit, they did something pretty similarly in the offseason, in that they're not expected to contend in 2020, yet they go out and they sign C.J. Cron to play first base. They signed Jonathan Scope to play second base. Still young in their careers, relatively speaking. Not going to win a World Series this year. But, first of all, you keep interest up. The team is more competitive with good players. And if they both hit as they potentially could, Cron, his problem has always been not necessarily lack of numbers, lack of playing time. Last year, he got more playing time, put up the best numbers of his career. Jonathan Scope, we know when he was an Oriole, he's a potential 30 home run threat. So if you could get maximum performance out of either or both of those players in Detroit, they become trade candidates to help a contender or a team who otherwise might not have been a contender get better in 2020. So kudos to the Tigers, and I hope the Orioles will follow suit, go out and sign Puig, hope for a hot start, get a quick trade, and let's get better long term in Birdland. Camden Yards is calling. There you go. Okay, so other news. Are you ready? I spent some time this weekend watching inter-squad games, and I'm intrigued by the situation in L.A. with David Price opting out for the year, where you have Ross Stripling, you have May, you have Gosselin, all vying for that last starting spot in the rotation. And I tell you, I watched yesterday, and I think Stripling has the heads up on that. I just have a gut feeling watching him play, how the Dodgers did. He pitched pretty well yesterday. I'm not looking at results. I'm looking at how they throw the ball, how their mannerism, their body language. I think Stripling's going to get that last starting spot. Now, will he keep it? I don't know. It'll be up to him. Remember, a few years ago, Stripling started the year hot. In fact, named to the All-Star team. And then in the second half, fell apart, wore out, I guess, and the Dodgers took an All-Star that year and left him off of the postseason roster. True story. So Ross Stripling has historically shown good starts. Now, will he be able to do it over only a 60-game season? The great news is for LA, if he doesn't, you've got Gosselin, you've got May ready to come in, who are going to be on the roster, who are going to probably start the year in the long relief role, who may be, and I'm going to get to this in a minute, we thought about a month ago, these long relievers may be extremely valuable. Until I heard what I heard this weekend and read what I read this weekend. I'm listening to radio, I'm reading articles, and DeGrom is expected to be up to 100 pitches on opening day. Garrett Cole threw 80-some yesterday. He's got at least one more scrimmage start. Strasburg. I mean, these guys have stayed in baseball shape. And so it sounds like the aces on clubs are game ready with some length to their starts. It's incredible. I watched Garrett Cole yesterday. I watched Ross Stripling yesterday. Garrett Cole looked like a man possessed. I know he's scrimmaging. He's playing against the Yankees. He's not in front of a crowd, but nobody's going to be, right? But he looked like a Cy Young guy already. So kudos again to the pitchers who kept their arms, kept their bodies in shape during the shutdown time. I'm impressed. I think the starting pitching is going to go longer at the start of the year, in many cases more than 5 innings. They're stretched out, it appears. Now, do the Dodgers with Stripling have backup? Yes. Do the Yankees have backup? Sure. It's your teams who don't have depth that have got to be the most concerned about starting pitching. And you may see them utilize long relievers more than other teams. I don't know. I'm watching, of course, I'm a Yankee fan. I watch Clark Schmidt, who I think is one of the best 5 arms on the Yankees. What they do or don't do with him opening day, I have no idea. But in terms of talent, command, presence on the mound, Clark Schmidt. Keep your eye on Schmidt. And something I always do, I'm a baseball card collector. And so this is something I do. Not only do I have my opinions of players' talents and abilities, but then I also go look on websites at how their baseball cards are either increasing or decreasing in value. Clark Schmidt's baseball cards are flying at high prices. And so that tells me I'm not the only one who's a Clark Schmidt believer. There you go, just food for thought. We'll see if Schmidt makes the team coming out of camp. I think he will. We'll see what type of leverage, if any, they put him in. I know he only pitched at Double-A, but the talent is there. And in a year where every game matters, and face it, that Eastern Division, I think, is the toughest division by far. I don't see any weak sisters. Even the Miami Marlins, who you may say, well, they're no good. The Marlins are a lot better. Get that out of your head. Their pitching is pretty good. I think they will scrap for runs, and if the pitching can keep them in games, I'm not saying they'll win the division. But I heard this over the weekend. Read this, rather. Didn't hear it. Read it. You take a 60-game stint last year. The Colorado Rockies, during one 60-game stretch, 42-18. Did you hear me? 42-18. So the Rockies make the playoffs. But another 60-game stretch, 16-44, and that probably plants you right smack dab in last place. So looking at which 60 games, the Nationals, another great example. We know, we've heard it so many times, The first 50 games last year, they start 19-31. Not a playoff team. But at some point, they had to have an incredible stretch because we know they made the wild card. We know they win the World Series. So that's why I go back to my starting comments on the Orioles and the Tigers. Teams that are in it, who may not ever have a chance to win it, they're going to be trying to get better, quicker, because if they see a chance, let's say the Padres. If the Padres, and I saw where Frenchie Cordero, I read Frenchie Cordero is scuffling at the plate. So I was really hopeful that Cordero could be a force this year for the Padres, fantasy and reality. But it looks like Frenchie Cordero may not get that opportunity. He's not performing well in scrimmages. We'll see how that makes out for the Padres. I was looking on Twitter this morning, and Lenny posted the question, do you think the 2020 season is legit? And I voted. And of course, as soon as you vote, it shows you the score, right? The percentages of yes and no's. And when I voted this morning, 56% said yes, it's legit. 44%, of course, then said no. I voted yes. Well, I know baseball is set up for 162 games. I get that. But it's what it is. Okay? And how many of you guys who play ball, like I did, ever went out and thought, I'm going to try to lose? I don't really care about today. And when you know you only have a certain number of games, that's even more reason to juice it up. I think we're going to see some intense action. I think the players are going to be into every pitch, every game. The manager's the same way. In fact, I'll even go this far. I think it could be, to watch the game, one of the more exciting seasons we've ever had. And of course, you go also to the fact we haven't had any sports for so long now. And here we go. We've been watching. How many of you watched The Last Dance, Chicago Bulls? How many of you thought that was like the awesomest thing? Because it was all we had. It was all we had. And now on the 23rd, 10 days from now, we've got real baseball. I can only imagine what the ratings will be opening day. It will be, in my opinion, the most watched opening day in recent memory, if not ever. We'll see, of course, how it pans out. But I really think we are going to have a great season. I think it's going to be competitive in fantasy like never before. I think players will get cut who you never thought might get cut. A little cold streak, a 5 or 6 game offer. Hey, that could be your season. That could be your fantasy season, which is why I think this year, I've said it before, pay leagues, I'm not for them this year. There's so much that is not what we are normally used to when we drafted teams. And I would just say, let's play for fun this year. Let's have a great time with it. Not that you shouldn't play fantasy, but I sure don't want to put $500 or $250 down on a league, especially if I've drafted Mike Trout, and we know Trout's going to miss 4 or 5 games. His wife's pregnant. He's going to miss effectively close to 10% of the season, and that doesn't even include an injury. And we still don't know all the deluge of those who are opting out. So, just my thought on that. Let's see. Now, I read this morning that the Cubs, David Ross, very pleasantly surprised and pleased with the performance of Jason Kipnis. Yes, remember Jason Kipnis, the fantasy darling? He used to play for the Cleveland Indians. He used to steal bases. He used to hit home runs. He used to be a really good fantasy second baseman. And now he is signed to a minor league contract with the Chicago Cubs, fighting it out, trying to make the roster. And then, of course,